Uh, I met Shifu for the first time in the early 1990s. I was still very young at that time. I'll talk a little bit about my background leading up to Shifu, though. I grew up in Catholic schools, and as you know, in Catholic schools, since elementary school, they want you to be baptized, and I refused to be baptized. I liked every time I go home from school, I like to read the Bible, very inspiring stories, but I didn't like the way it was being preached in school. So I do not want to be baptized. And my parents were actually called into the principal's office because I don't want to be baptized. I was lucky that my parents supported that. Um, but my mother has been looking for the right teacher for over 10 years, right? So during that time, I have been exposed to different types of faith traditions, right? From Hinduism to Christianity, even to Judaism, and all those different religions, because my mom was just looking for the right teacher. My experience of all of these, including Buddhism at that time in Toronto, where I grew up, I didn't really like it. Be, um, I just didn't like how it was being preached, right? So when I went to university, I became an atheist. I believed in science, right? So one day, my mom saw one of her good friends, very bad tempered, but she went to the Chan Meditation Center in New York. She attended one of Shifu's retreats. And she came back, she was like a completely different person. So my mom got curious and she signed up for the next retreat and she went down. And she didn't know who Master Sheng Yen was, and she didn't know who he was in Taiwan. She just felt like he's a very honest monk and feels like he's the right teacher. So she came back from the retreat, and the following weekend, they actually were offering beginners meditation classes. So my mom asked, me and my siblings if we wanted to go down to New York to learn beginners meditation. Now, at that time, I was in university, atheist, right? And I was going, I'm not crazy about that idea of driving 12 hours down to New York City just to learn beginner's meditation. And I was interested in meditation, but I wasn't interested in the religious part of it at that time. So my mom tempted us by saying, "Oh, you get to like do sightseeing. You get to see the Statue of Liberty and some of these famous New York um, landmarks and stuff." And we go, "Okay." So my youngest brother and I went, and when I entered the Chan Meditation Center, it felt very right. It was not like a lot of religious centers that I visited before. I don't know if you have seen Chan Meditation Center in the early days, like early days,
No,
like
I was there
1990s.
1997 about.
Okay, slightly changed, but still kind of like that. Like early 1990s. It was very simple. When you enter the grand hall, there was this blue carpet in the middle, and a Buddha statue, and just like the incense burner. That's it. Nothing else was there. And it just somehow felt quite right. So I learned beginner's meditation from there. And actually, Guo Fashi was the one that taught me, like taught that class. So I learned meditation from him. And the next day, strangely, as one of the monks over there asked if I want to take the three refuges without even thinking. I said yes. Isn't that strange? I said that it's because remember when I was in elementary school, I refused to be baptized. And I was an atheist when I was in university, right? So at that time, I was still in university. So strangely, as I said yes. And I didn't know what I was getting myself into at that time. So after taking the three refuges, then let's see. Then Shifu gave a talk on the Diamond Sutra, and I really understood what he was saying. Although he had like a translator there that translates into English, and my Chinese at that time was really bad. Uh, so my mom would ask me, "Do I understand what Shifu said?" But surprisingly, I understood him very clearly. Right, the English translation helped confirm some of my understanding from what I heard of what he taught. Now, the thing that really I admired about what he was teaching, it was the style. Right, he was still teaching the Diamond Sutra, which is a very deep sutra, but the style that how he approached it and how he talked about it is very empowering. It's not something about that's why I didn't like about preaching. It's like, you're at the mercy of a deity. You're at the mercy of a higher power. Uh, so I didn't like all of those because I believed in, like, if I put in the effort, I can make the change. So the way he was talking about the Diamond Sutra, it was in that way, and I felt like that was right. Right, and that was the first time I met Shifu too. Anyways, the night before, we had dinner in the dining hall downstairs in the basement. Now, at that time, it's very cozy, right? You will not see this in Taiwan, but we were lucky in the Chang Meditation Center. It was just a table, small table, and Shifu sitting at the head of the table. And I'm just trying to disappear and sit as far away as I could. And he looked at me and then he said, "When you finish your studies," because I was still in school, "when you finish your studies, come join me and become a nun."
Oh,
So
wow.
what I said at that time was just trying to be cocky, right? Then I'll say, "Oh, we'll see," 随缘, right? And really, the whole journey of how I became a nun, it really was that. It was the causes and conditions. Several years later, I was in graduate school, and for almost 10 years, every time Shifu is in New York and he has his open house, or sometimes he has retreats, I would drive down from Toronto 12 hours to listen to a 1.5 hour talk and then drive back that weekend. And I've done it for almost 10 years. So I felt like, at that time I was just getting tiring, just keep driving down just to listen to Shifu talk. So I thought, why don't I try to find a graduate school closer in New York City, and then I could and find a job there, and then I could volunteer at CMC quite easily, and then when Shifu comes, it's easy for me to go listen to his teachings. Um, I started to have that kind of thought, and so I was at CMC again at that time preparing for the DDMBA Dharma Pala gathering, annual gathering. And so one of the nuns told me, we were working on the second floor, and she says, "Oh, this painting of the Kuan Yin on the second floor was the same. It's the painting that Shifu actually did his prostrations to when he was in Japan." So she told me, "Well, then why don't you make a vow?" Because at that point in time, I was also starting to think about becoming a nun after I finished my graduate studies, because I found that, I was very successful in school. I was very successful working, doing everything very well. Uh, Also, very happy being a consumer, buying lots of stuff. But I felt there was an emptiness that I could not address. And I discovered that when I was doing charity work, helping other people, serving kind of like the university, or serving my company, I felt very happy. So I started to think, like, the seed of, like, the thought of becoming a nun started to kind of come up. It started to sprout. That was November, right? And so they said, "Okay, so now go make a vow." And I was going atheist, right? And I was going, I'm not sure if I want to believe that, but since everyone is telling me that, I'll just do it anyways. So I did make a vow to say that when I finish my graduate studies, like I'm interested in becoming a nun, right? And you don't know how fast it happened once I made that vow. So that was before the DDMB annual meeting. So it's just like a few weeks after that. we were in, New Jersey having that annual meeting. And Shifu at that point in time was his English secretary, resigned because she was going to get married. So, and then I don't know how he knew that I had this thought of becoming a nun already. So he looked at me and he said, "Do you want to be a nun? You can be my English secretary first, and then see if it's suitable. Then you can become a nun." And I was kind of like, I didn't know what to say. But the funny thing is, I still said yes. I didn't know what I put myself into. But out of this whole journey, though, just to summarize it, though, I find that Shifu was a huge inspiration to me, because at the age of 5, I have started to ask my mother, what am I born in this world to do? I was searching for my purpose. So the typical answer you would get from parents, though, is grow up healthy, have a good education, graduate, get a good job, find a good husband, right? Get married, have children, raise children, and then you retire, and then you be a grandparent, right? And I was like, no, 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 no. Other than that, right? What am I born in this world to do? I was looking for something more than that. And I found that I was like searching for that answer since I was 5 years old until I met Shifu, right? And I never really thought about, how my life completely turned around and transformed after I met Shifu. And once I became his secretary, his English secretary, and then later the international affairs assistant, um, thinking back about this, about serving him and seeing what he is doing, I find that it's his vow, his the stand that he takes, right, which is Buddha Dharma is so wondrous, right, and yet a lot of people don't know about it, and a lot of people also misunderstand it, right? So Shifu set out in his life to share what Dharma is, so that people can see what is right Dharma or what is orthodox Dharma. And he was just doing this very selflessly. He's not doing it as in like, I am telling you this is the right Dharma, but he's sharing it by also his being, what he is, by his own example. And it really inspired me because of what his stand is. So I was at the right place at the right time, right? When he asked me to be his English secretary, right? Because it was during a time where he was the most active in international affairs. And so, what he does in this world, talking about peace, and during that time too, because 9/11 just happened not very long ago. So there was a lot of racism that was going about, and there was a lot of religious conflicts with the Muslims, and what he was doing to try to promote peace, right? What he was trying to do also in promoting respecting differences, right? Finding the commonality. It does not mean uniformity, right? Commonality is our humanity, right? But respecting differences, which is diversity, and he was going about doing that, and I felt when he was doing it, I felt like I think that's my life's work too, right? I think I found the answer of the purpose of my life, which is actually in service, right? Transformation and social change. I felt like, yeah, I think that's what it is. So throughout, this years that I was serving with him, there were a lot of challenges. He gave me a very difficult project, right? At that time, I was only tonsured. Tonsured means I became a novice monastic, putting on monastic robes and shaving the head. I was only tonsured 3 or 4 months, and he gave me this big project. DDMBA is to apply for UN NGO status. And novice monastic, nobody in the organization, and he gave me this big project. It was a huge challenge trying to fulfill that. We had no blueprint. We don't really know how this is going to unfold. And while I was still working on this project, Shifu were giving some guidance, but then in 2009, he passed away. So I had to continue to figure this out myself, right? There were challenges internally. There were a lot of challenges outside because I have to kind of think about my experiences with Shifu, how he interacted with people around the world, right? And different religious leaders, his peers, and what he said and what he did. And then I have to take that and try to translate that into what the UN work would be, right? So, and I found that, yeah, the whole thing, it was not just a project. It really was my transformation, my personal transformation in experiencing what the Dharma is. Because if I don't do that, I wouldn't know how to move forward, right? It would just be a project. It would just be a job. But Shifu was able to awaken in me. I think the biggest inspiration that I have is my purpose in life, right? And which is really the empowerment of people. And I try to convey that to, people that I meet in the UN work that I do too. Yeah. A very long answer. I remember once in 2006, actually in the master's quarters, right? I was again normally just giving Shifu, his some of the files from Taiwan that he has to go through and approve or give instructions. And then suddenly, Shifu looked at me, and then he said, "Do you think I am trained by Sangha?" And then I was looking at him. I was going, "Okay, what's this? This is a very strange question." And then he continued. He says, "Do you think that Master Yin Shun, right, was trained by the Sangha?" And I was going, "Okay, I'm not sure where he's getting at. This is getting stranger, right? And what do you think about Master Tai Chi? Do you think he was trained by Sangha?" And then I was thinking, I would guess so, right? Because um, they went to seminary schools, they went to Buddhist colleges and stuff, and Shifu did too. I said, "Well, I think so." And Shifu says, "No." He says that we are all trained by our environment. And then he looked at me and he said, "You will be trained by your environment." Right? And he says, "I taught you what I could, right, over these years. And so now you think about whatever that you wanted to do, think about what I would do, right?" And he says, "Then you go forward and do it with full confidence." He says, "You will succeed." That was actually I say that the biggest lesson for me. I didn't understand at that time. I didn't. But several years later, as I was still doing this NGO work, I gradually got to understand it. I went from just doing this as a work to embracing the entire vision of what this work is about, right? Which is the wonderful empowerment that you get from practicing Buddha Dharma, right? And sharing this with people because a lot of people don't know. And just to share this part with people, that I came to a point where I'm no longer just doing the job, but I'm just finding that as I'm doing this, the transformation that happens within myself and also how to support other people in this part too, for them to empower themselves. It doesn't have to be Buddhism, but it really is about empowerment, self-empowerment. It's not from a higher deity. It's not from external acknowledgement, but it comes from within yourself. right? So that was the biggest lesson that I have from Shifu, that he had given me this project to help me find my purpose. What I shared with you is my perspective of my experience with Shifu, and my causes and conditions were that Shifu was very engaged in the international um, world, what's happening around. And in Europe right now, especially, with the Russia-Ukraine war, and sadly, also, with Israel and the Hamas, it it's all in that same continent, right? And it actually makes a lot of people very anxious, right? Because you don't know what is going to happen. And when people are in a state of anxiety, the coping mechanisms that we have would be to blame, right? Very quickly to blame someone. It's so easy, right? It's not my fault. It is someone's fault. Not my responsibility. It's someone else's responsibility. What is emerging is actually what actually Pope Francis said already a long time ago. He said it in, I'm not sure exactly the year, but what I know of, I could be wrong with the year, but it was in 2016, Pope Francis, right? And what he said is the culture of indifference. We all know what is happening right now. The Europeans know what is happening right now around the world. They know what the problems are. They know the science behind it. It's not just the Europeans, it's a lot of people around the world. We can't claim that we're ignorant. We're no longer ignorant, right? We know what is happening around the world. We know the science is there to tell us what we're doing, and we are barreling, okay? We're creating this train that is barreling the human civilization towards doom, extinction. We know, we've seen this, we've heard it, right? And we know, and we've heard of a lot of solutions. Why do we not make anything? Why can't we change? Why do we not do anything? Not my problem. I didn't do anything. They did. Let them fix it, right? Let the governments fix it. Let the corporations fix it. Let other people fix it, not me. Everyone says that. Culture of indifference. They don't think that they have any responsibility to make that change because you're always expecting someone else to change, right? So that is the judge and the censor in our brains, right? Judging and censoring. What we're doing is right, what we're doing is wrong, justifying that. The heart space is a very different space because it knows, and it's full of compassion and love, right? And how can we um, share this with the world, share every one of our own unique gifts, grow into our unique potential, right? Live our own lives in a way that is alive, right? Not just doing what everyone is doing, like, ordinary life, but we all have this capacity and this potential, right? And unique gifts that we could give this world, make it better, right? You just need to activate that. And how can we activate that kind of space? Again, we go back to that iceberg. You don't just try to fix what is wrong, right? That is symptoms. That's just correcting behaviors. How do you correct behaviors? I'm going to regulate it away. I'm going to set all kinds of rules and policies that you cannot behave this way because this is bad behavior, and all kinds of punishments that's going to come because you behave this way, versus, I'll give you rewards and stuff for, doing this good. Behavioral change is good, but it's not sustainable, right? So in Buddha Dharma, blanked out right now which sutra it was. There is this saying, sorry, I cannot remember the sutra right now, it's like blinked. But I think you would have heard of it before. I'm going to say it in Chinese first and I'll say it in English, okay? 诸恶莫作, 众善奉行, right? What else? 自净其意, 是诸佛法, right? So what that is in English is do no evil, right? Do all good, right? Purify the mind, This is the teachings of the Buddha, right? So how do we activate that kind of space? It's not just behavioral change. Whatever you're doing outside, you have to reflect inside too, right? So do no evil, do good, do all good. That is behavioral shifts, behavioral changes, but it's not sufficient. The Buddha also taught purify the mind. So this means whatever you're doing, you got to reflect. What is the invisible assumptions or the values or that we're holding on that is influencing the behavior, right? Shine the light on that, see that, and then shift that, purify that, right? Then you continue to do no evil, do good, and then reflect that inside of yourself. What is the invisible values that is manifesting this as you keep shining this? So this is a cycle. As you're doing good, you're continuing to purify yourself. As you're doing good and you're purifying yourself, and as you do that, every cell in your body will kind of be permeated, right? It will be so full of the wisdom and the compassion of that understanding, of that purification. And when that happens, it very naturally will radiate out in the whole world through your actions. So that's what I keep trying to tell people, that it's purifying inside too. The work that you're doing, like with the young people, the work that they're doing outside, fighting this is wrong, trying to correct this, they're doing that. And then maybe in the weekends, or maybe like sometimes during the year, they would go for yoga classes, they go for maybe, they go visit a psychologist, or they go for retreats, they go meditation. And then, when they go back to work, it's like, this again, right? This is wrong, this is wrong. It seems like inner cultivation and the external work you're doing is completely separate. But they're not. They are at the same time happening. So if we see this in what the Buddha's teaching is, right? Do no evil, right? Do all good. Purify the mind. They all have to happen simultaneously. That is what the Buddha taught. So if we could do that, then everyone will be uplifted as they're doing good stuff. They will continue to actually increase, expand their consciousness and the love and compassion that they have, not just to a small specific group of people, but it will keep expanding to the point where it's the whole of humanity, and then it will expand even further. That includes all life on earth. Not just humanity. It's not anthropocentric, right? But it is all life. So humanity's consciousness will continue to grow. So that is what Shifu said too. Uplift the character of humankind so that you can build a pure land on earth. Isn't that what the Buddha taught, right? Do good, don't do bad, purify the mind.